what's absolutely everywhere these days, especially if you're in the UK? Prosecco.
Oh, yeah.
It's popped up at every brunch, every celebration, every like Friday night get-together. But have you ever just wondered why this particular sparkling wine has captured so much of our attention?
That's exactly the fascinating question we're tackling today.
Yeah.
You've shared a great collection of sources, articles exploring Prosecco's history, digging into how it's made, and even a sommelier's expert take on why it's become such a phenomenon, particularly, in the UK.
Right. So our mission with this deep dive isn't to just think of Prosecco as the bubbly you reach for when champagne feels a bit too, well, fancy.
Mm-hmm.
We really want to uncover its own unique story, explore its origins, understand its production, and ultimately figure out why the UK has embraced it so enthusiastically.
And it's key to understand from the get-go that Prosecco isn't just trying to be a budget version of champagne. It really isn't.
Okay.
It has its own distinct character, coming from different grapes, a unique terroir, and a completely different way of making those bubbles. The sheer scale of its success in the UK since the start of this century is quite something. I mean, it's become the top-selling sparkling wine. It outsells even champagne.
Wow. It really makes you think. And the sources point to a few main things. It's generally more affordable, right?
Definitely.
It's got that light and fruity flavor that so many people enjoy. It's been marketed really well. And it just seems to be everywhere you look in the UK.
Absolutely. All those things. And it's important to move beyond that simple idea that Prosecco is somehow, lesser than champagne.
Yeah.
They're different, not one better than the other. The Glera grape, the specific terroir of the Veneto and Friuli-Venezia Giulia regions in Italy, and the Charmat-Martinotti production method all come together to give Prosecco its own unique appeal.
So with this distinct character, let's dig deeper into its own story. Where should we start? Maybe its origins?
Good place to start. The story of Prosecco begins in the Veneto region of northeastern Italy. Our sources trace its history back quite a few centuries, actually.
Oh, right.
Yeah, noting the early cultivation of the Glera grape. And interestingly, that grape was also once called Prosecco itself around the area of Trieste. From there, it spread to the beautiful hills of Conegliano and Valdobia d'Ain.
So it wasn't always the fizzy drink we know and love today, like the stuff we see everywhere in the UK.
Correct. Originally, Prosecco was mainly a still wine, or perhaps only slightly sparkling, a frizzante style. Mostly just enjoyed by people living right there in the region.
Ah, okay.
Its global popularity is, relatively speaking, quite recent. It really took off thanks to improvements in the Charmat-Martinotti production method. We'll get into that. And some very clever marketing.
And that DOC we often see on the bottle, that's like a quality mark, right? A guarantee.
Exactly. The creation of the Prosecco Denominazione di Origine Controllata, or DOC, in 2009 was a really significant step. It acts as a guarantee of origin and sets certain quality standards for the wine. Protects the name, too.
Okay, so where exactly does this DOC area cover? Is it just those hills?
No, the Prosecco DOC is actually quite large. It stretches across 9 provinces within 2 big regions, Veneto and Friuli-Venezia Giulia.
Wow, okay.
This area includes a really diverse range of landscapes, from flat plains all the way up to those incredibly important hills.
And are those hills generally considered where the higher quality Prosecco comes from?
Yes, that's a fair assessment. The most prestigious areas known for producing superior quality Prosecco are definitely the hills of Conegliano, Valdobia d'Ain Prosecco Superiore, DOCG, and a Solo Prosecco Superiore, DOCG.
DOCG, so that G means even stricter.
Exactly. The G stands for Garantita Guaranteed. It indicates even stricter production rules and generally a higher level of quality.
What makes that hilly area so special then? Is it just a pretty place to grow grapes, or is there more to it?
Oh, it's much more than just scenery, though it is beautiful. The climate there is key. It's a temperate continental climate, but it gets influences from both the nearby Adriatic Sea and the Alps behind it. And that combination is crucial. It creates these ideal conditions for the Glera grape to ripen slowly and evenly. That helps it keep its vital acidity while developing a wider range of aromas.
And I'm guessing the soil plays a role too, like it always does with wine.
Absolutely. The soil composition in the Prosecco region varies quite a bit. You get mixes of clay, limestone, sand.
Okay.
And this variety in the soil contributes to the unique way the Glera grape expresses itself in different spots. It adds these subtle differences to the final wine.
Now, about those DOC rules you mentioned, what kinds of things do they actually specify?
Well, they cover quite a few aspects. It starts with the grapes, of course. To be called Prosecco DOC, a wine must be made with at least 85% Glera grapes.
85%? Okay.
The other 15% can be made up of other permitted grapes. Some are local, like Biancetta, Trevigiana, and Verdeso. Others are more international, like Pinot Bianco, Pinot Grigio, Chardonnay.
In Pinot Noir, too, right, for the rosé?
Exactly. Pinot Nero, as it's called there, is allowed, specifically for making Prosecco Rosé DOC, up to 15% of that, too.
So it's mainly Glera, but there can be a little bit of other stuff blended in. To add complexity, perhaps?
Precisely. These other grapes can add subtle layers, structure, or different aromatic nuances to the final wine. The rules also clearly define the geographical boundaries of the DOC. You can't just make it anywhere.
Right.
And crucially, they require the use of the Charmat-Martinotti Method for making it fizzy, the tank method.
Okay, we'll definitely come back to that method. And what about the different types you see on labels like spumante, frizzante?
Ah, yes, those are the three official styles within the DOC based on the level of fizz. Spumante is the fully sparkling wine we most often see, the one with noticeable, long-lasting bubbles.
That's the main one, I think.
That's the most common, yeah. Frizzante is lightly sparkling, gentler bubbles, less pressure in the bottle. And then there's Tranquillo, which is the still non-sparkling version.
Still Prosecco. I don't think I've ever seen that.
It's quite rare, especially outside Italy, but it is an official style.
Okay, and then there's all the talk about sweetness levels, Brut, extra dry, and so on. That seems important too.
Very important. The sweetness levels are determined by the amount of residual sugar left in the finished wine. And there's quite a range.
Yeah. Lay it out for us.
Okay, so you have Brut Nature, which is the driest. It has practically no sugar, less than 3 grams per liter, very crisp. Then Extra Brut, also very dry, 0 to 6 grams. Then you get Brut, which is under 12 grams. Still dry, but maybe a bit rounder.
Brut is pretty common, right?
Very common, very versatile. After Brut comes Extra Dry, which is 12 to 17 grams per liter.
Wait, so extra dry is actually sweeter than Brut. That always trips me up.
Huh. It's a bit confusing, isn't it? Extra Dry has more sugar than Brut. It tends to taste fruitier, often popular as an aperitif.
Good to know. Okay, what's next?
Next is Dry, sometimes called Secco, which is 17 to 32 grams. Now you're noticing the sweetness more. It might feel a bit fuller. Then Demi-Sec or Avocado from 32 to 50 grams. Definitely sweet now, good with lighter desserts perhaps. And finally Dolce or Amabile, which is over 50 grams per liter. Quite sweet, like a dessert wine.
Wow, that's a huge spectrum, from bone dry to properly sweet.
It really is.
And those superior DOCGs, Conegliano, Valdobbiadene, and Asolo, what makes their rules even stricter than the DOC?
The DOCGs have tighter regulations on things like exactly where the vineyards can be planted, often on steeper slopes. They limit how many grapes can be harvested per hectare, often lower yields for more concentration. And they might have stricter rules about the winemaking itself, all aiming for a higher standard.
Right. And do they taste different?
Generally, yes. Conegliano Valdobbiadene is seen as the historic heartland. Its wines, often from hand-harvested grapes on those steep hills, can show more complexity, sometimes a distinct minerality, and maybe even a little potential to age.
Age Prosecco. Interesting.
Just a little for the best ones. Asolo is a newer DOCG, but it's known for producing really elegant, fresh, fruity Proseccos with a lovely, vibrant acidity.
It sounds like a really interesting region to visit. I think I recall hearing something about a Prosecco trail or road.
You're absolutely right. The Strada del Prosecco, the Prosecco Road, it's a famous wine route that winds through those beautiful hills of Conegliano Valdobbiadene.
Ah.
It gives you the chance to explore vineyards, visit wineries, taste the different styles, and really soak up the Prosecco culture.
Sounds lovely. Okay, so the place is important, but what about the grape itself? You mentioned Glera is the heart of Prosecco. What makes it so special?
Glera is absolutely fundamental. It dictates the aroma, the flavor profile, the whole character, really.
Right.
If you look at the vine itself, it has, medium-sized leaves, medium-sized bunches of greenish yellow berries. It's a fairly vigorous vine, produces a decent amount of grapes, and ripens sort of mid to late season.
So it's a pretty reliable, maybe resilient grape then.
You could say that, but its key characteristic, the thing that makes it so perfect for sparkling wine, is its impressive ability to maintain good acidity, even when it's grown in warmer climates.
Ah, and that acidity is crucial for freshness.
Exactly. That's what gives Prosecco its signature refreshing, lively, crisp feel. It stops it from feeling heavy or flabby.
And what about those lovely aromas we talked about, like the apple and pear? Where do they come from in the Glera grape?
Those are Glera's primary aromas. They're wonderfully fresh and inviting. You typically get crisp, white fruits. Green apple is classic, also pear. sometimes zesty citrus notes like lemon or grapefruit, and often delicate floral hints like acacia or honeysuckle maybe.
Sounds nice.
Sometimes you might also pick up subtle notes of white melon or even a touch of almond. Because it holds on to that balanced acidity, Glera is really responsible for that signature freshness and lightness that makes Prosecco so easy to enjoy.
You also mentioned that other grapes can be added up to 15%. What do they bring to the party?
Yeah, those permitted secondary grapes each add their own subtle touches. Some local ones, like Biancetta Trevigiana and Verdeso, can boost the acidity and freshness even more. Verdeso might add a little herbal note, too. Then you have things like Pinot Bianco, which can provide a bit more structure, maybe some body, and hints of riper white fruit. Pinot Grigio can also add body and a little aromatic complexity.
And Chardonnay?
Chardonnay can bring a bit more depth, maybe some stone fruit notes. And while Prosecco is usually enjoyed young, Chardonnay could theoretically add a little more potential for aging, though that's not really the main goal.
Right. And Pinot Nero for the rosé.
Exactly. Pinot Nero or Noir gives the rosé Prosecco its lovely pink color and those fresh red fruit aromas, think strawberry, maybe raspberry.
But having that minimum 85% Glera is what makes sure it still tastes like Prosecco. It keeps that recognizable character.
Precisely. That minimum ensures that the characteristic aromatic profile, the fruit, the flowers, plus the refreshing acidity, and the overall light, approachable style that we associate with Prosecco remain absolutely dominant.
Now let's talk about the fizz. You mentioned the Charmat-Martinotti method several times. What exactly is that, and why is it so important for Prosecco's bubbles?
Okay, the Charmat-Martinotti method, often just called the Charmat method, or sometimes the Italian method or tank method, it's named after Eugene Charmat and Federico Martinotti, who were key in developing and refining it.
Right.
Basically, it's the process Prosecco uses to get its bubbles. And the key difference is that the second fermentation, the one that creates the CO2, takes place in large, pressurized stainless steel tanks. They're called autoclaves.
Okay, so it's a different approach than, say, champagne, where the bubbles form in each individual bottle.
Exactly. Champagne uses the traditional method, or method champenoise, with the second fermentation happening right there in the bottle you buy. The Charmat method is designed differently, really focusing on preserving the fresh and fruity aromas of the Glera grape.
Can you walk me through the Charmat process? What are the main steps?
Sure. It starts with making a still base wine from the Glera grapes, just like any white wine.
Okay, a normal wine first.
Then this base wine is put into those big, sealed, pressurized stainless steel tanks. And then they add something called the liqueur de tirage.
Liqueur de tirage. What's that?
It's essentially a mixture of sugar and carefully selected yeasts.
Ah, so the yeast eats the sugar in the big tank, and that's what creates the bubbles.
Precisely. The yeasts ferment the sugar, producing alcohol and carbon dioxide. Because the tank is sealed and under pressure, the CO2 can't escape. It dissolves into the wine, creating the sparkle.
Clever. Does it stay in the tank long?
There's usually a relatively short period where the wine sits on the lees. Those are the spent yeast cells left over after fermentation. This can add a little bit of complexity, some texture, maybe subtle bready notes, but it's generally much shorter than in the traditional method.
Okay. And then they just bottle it straight from the tank, is that it?
Almost. After that short period on the lees, the wine is usually chilled and then filtered still under pressure to remove those lees and make sure the wine is clear.
Right.
And then, yes, it's bottled again under pressure to make sure all those lovely dissolved bubbles stay in the wine, ready for when you pop the cork.
So why is this tank method preferred for Prosecco over the bottle fermentation used for champagne? What's the big advantage for Prosecco style?
The main advantage is that the Charmat method is particularly good at preserving those fresh, fruity, and floral primary aromas that are so typical of the Glera grape.
Because it doesn't sit on the lees for ages.
Exactly. Because the wine generally has much shorter contact with the lees compared to the traditional method, those primary fruit and floral notes aren't overshadowed by the more complex, yeasty, toasty brioche-like notes that develop with long aging on lees in the bottle.
That makes perfect sense. So the way it's made really dictates the final taste profile.
Absolutely. To really highlight the difference, the traditional method, with its long lees, contact, and bottle, leads to those more complex, structured, often creamier, and age-worthy profiles we associate with champagne or cava. The Charmat method, on the other hand, is generally more efficient in terms of cost and time, which helps with that accessible price point we talked about. And it consistently results in wines that are lighter, fresher, fruitier, and more overtly floral. All the hallmarks of classic Prosecco.
So the Charmat method is really fundamental to Prosecco's style, its freshness, its aroma, and maybe even its popularity.
Absolutely. It's key to its identity and its accessibility.
Okay, so we understand the region, the Glera grape, and how it gets its fizz using the Charmat method. Now, let's dive back into those different styles you mentioned, that whole range of sweetness levels. That seems crucial for choosing one.
Indeed. Prosecco styles are primarily defined by how much residual sugar is left in the wine after fermentation stops. And as we touched on, this has a really big impact on how they taste and, importantly, what foods they pair well with.
So, starting again with the driest, just to get it clear, what are we looking at?
Okay, at the very driest end, you have Brut Nature. You might also see Pas Dolce or dosage 0 on the label. This has less than 3 grams of sugar per liter. It's very dry, very crisp, often with a noticeable acidity and mineral notes. Aromas are subtle citrus, maybe some herbs, just a hint of yeast, perhaps.
Sounds intense. What's next?
Next up is Extra Brut. That's between 0 and 6 grams of sugar per liter. Still very dry and refreshing, nice balanced acidity, light fruit flavors. Very food-friendly, actually.
Okay, those sound like they'd be super crisp, maybe for oysters or something. What comes after that?
Then you have Brut, which, as we said, is very popular. It has less than 12 grams of sugar per liter. It's still considered dry, but it often feels a bit more rounded, a touch softer on the palate, while still keeping that vital acidity. You'll often find those lovely white fruit and floral aromas. It's really versatile.
Right. Brut seems like a safe bet if you're not sure. And this is where we start getting into the slightly sweeter ones, including the confusing one.
Exactly. Next is Extra Dry. And yes, this is where the name is slightly counterintuitive because it actually tastes perceptibly sweeter than Brut. It has between 12 and 17 grams of sugar per liter.
Right. More sugar than Brut, despite the name.
Correct. This style often seems fruitier because of that touch of sweetness. You might get more stone fruit notes like peach. Still floral. It's a very popular choice as an aperitif in many markets, including the UK.
So extra dry isn't actually extra dry. That's a really good thing for you, the listener, to remember when you're buying.
Definitely worth remembering. Following Extra Dry is Dry, sometimes labeled Secco. This has between 17 and 32 grams of sugar per liter.
Okay, so definitely sweeter now.
Yes, here the sweetness is more apparent. It often gives the wine a slightly fuller body, and you might find riper fruit flavors coming through, like melon or even a hint of honey. This can pair nicely with slightly richer appetizers, maybe something with a sweet and sour element.
And now we're properly heading into dessert wine territory.
Pretty much, yeah. Next is Demi-Sec, which can also be called Abricado. That has between 32 and 50 grams of sugar per liter. It's noticeably sweet now. Think ripe fruit flavors like peach and syrup, ripe melon. It pairs well with light fruit desserts, pastries, that sort of thing.
Okay.
And the sweetest. Finally, at the sweetest end of the scale, you have Dolce, which means sweet, or sometimes amabile. This has more than 50 grams of sugar per liter. It's quite sweet, often with flavors of candied fruit, honey, maybe even some sweet spices. Really best enjoyed with richer desserts, or perhaps on its own.
That's such a wide range. Does the UK market, where Prosecco is so huge, tend to prefer one end of that spectrum?
Yes, the sources consistently point to the UK market, showing a strong preference for the Brut and extra dry styles.
Okay. The drier end, but not the very driest.
Exactly. These styles seem to hit a kind of sweet spot for many British palates. They offer that refreshing quality, good fruit intensity, but maybe with just that subtle hint of sweetness in the extra dry that makes it very easy drinking and approachable.
And how does that sweetness level actually change how we experience the wine overall, not just the sweetness itself?
Well, sweetness has a significant impact on the whole perception of a wine. It can make the wine feel rounder in the mouth, give it a sense of fuller body. It can also soften the perception of acidity, make it seem less sharp.
Yeah.
And it balances other components. Tannins aren't really a factor in Prosecco, but in red wines, sweetness can soften tannins too. Ultimately, it's all about the balance between the sweetness, the acidity, the fruit flavors, and the bubbles.
Balance is key. Okay, so we've covered the sweetness levels. Now, what about the actual flavors and aromas you typically find when you take a sniff and a sip of a good Prosecco? What should you be looking for?
As we touched on when talking about Glera, the typical aromatic profile is really appealing. You get those fresh white fruits, green apple and pear are classics. Sometimes a hint of white melon, too. You'll often find those delicate floral notes, acacia blossom, maybe honeysuckle or wisteria, and usually some refreshing citrus hints in the background, like lemon zest or a bit of grapefruit.
And those come mainly from the grape and the place where it's grown, the terroir, right? And the winemaking keeps them fresh?
Exactly. The terroir gives the potential, the Glera grape provides the raw materials, and the Charmat method, by minimizing oxidation and lees contact, really helps to keep those primary fruit and floral characteristics bright and upfront.
So what about on the palate, when you taste it?
When you taste it, you should expect that lovely, refreshing crispness, thanks to the acidity. It generally has a fairly light body,
Hmm.
and the flavors will often echo the aromas. You'll taste the green apple, the pear, the lemon. The perceived intensity of those flavors and, of course, the level of sweetness will vary depending on the specific style, from Brut Nature to Dolce.
And we can't forget the bubbles. You mentioned pearlish. How do they add to the whole experience when you're drinking it?
Oh, the pearlies, those lovely streams of bubbles, is absolutely essential to the Prosecco experience. Ideally, in a good spumante, the bubbles should be fine, numerous, and persistent, not too big or aggressive. They contribute a lot. First, they add to the feeling of freshness and lightness. They literally stimulate your taste buds, making the wine feel more vibrant. They provide a pleasant tactile sensation, that little tingle on the tongue. And maybe most importantly, they continuously carry those wonderful aromas up out of the glass to your nose, enhancing the whole sensory experience from start to finish.
It's not just fizz for fizz's sake, then.
Not at all. It's integral to the wine's structure and enjoyment.
Okay, so we've got a really good picture now of what Prosecco is all about: the place, the grape, the method, the styles, the taste. Let's circle back properly to the UK. Why did it become such a massive hit there? What were the magic ingredients for that success story?
Yeah, the UK's love affair with Prosecco, as the sources detail, really comes down to a powerful combination of key factors hitting at the right time.
Yeah.
First and foremost, as we mentioned, was the price. Compared to champagne, Prosecco offered a much more accessible price point. This really democratized sparkling wine consumption. It wasn't just for oligarchs or weddings anymore.
Right, you could have it on a Tuesday.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Made sparkling wine something that more people could enjoy much more regularly, not just for those really, really special occasions. That was huge.
That definitely makes sense. It just felt more approachable on the wallet. What else played a big role?
The taste profile itself was a massive draw. That light, fruity, often slightly off-dry in the case of extra dry, and generally easy-to-drink style just hit the mark for a broad range of palates.
Yeah.
Particularly, perhaps, for those who might have found champagne a bit too dry or too acidic or maybe too complex with those yeasty notes. Prosecco was just easy and enjoyable.
So it wasn't intimidating. You didn't feel like you needed a qualification to drink it.
Precisely. And that ties into the next point: really effective marketing and branding. Prosecco was often positioned brilliantly as modern, fun, festive, and crucially approachable and unstuffy.
Right. Less formal than champagne.
Definitely less formal.
Yeah.
It lost some of the perhaps slightly intimidating baggage or perceived ceremony that can sometimes be associated with champagne. It felt more casual, more spontaneous.
And it just seemed like it was suddenly being served at every single event, every party, every gallery opening, every bottomless brunch.
Yet, too, its strong presence, its sheer visibility at all sorts of social gatherings and celebrations, big and small, really cemented its popularity. It became the default celebratory drink for many. The bubbles themselves became a symbol of accessible celebration.
So how did this huge surge in Prosecco's popularity impact the other sparkling wines that were already in the UK market? Did champagne sales just fall off a cliff?
Not exactly fall off a cliff. Champagne largely managed to maintain its position as the ultimate luxury item, the pinnacle for those extra special moments or for people wanting that specific prestige.
Okay.
But it's certainly faced increased competition, particularly in terms of sheer volume from Prosecco. People might still choose champagne for a milestone anniversary, maybe, but for a regular Friday night celebration, Prosecco became the much more likely go-to bubbly for many.
And what about cava, the Spanish one?
Cava faced challenges, too. It's made using the traditional method like champagne, so it often has more of those yeasty notes. In the UK market, it was sometimes perceived as less immediately fruity than Prosecco, and often wasn't quite as competitively priced either, losing out on both fronts to some extent.
Fascinating market dynamics. So, okay, if our listener is now inspired to go out and grab a bottle of Prosecco, or maybe they have one chilling already, what's the best way to enjoy it? Let's talk practicalities, serving temperature, the right kind of glass, and what foods pair really well with it.
Good idea. For serving temperature, you want it nicely chilled. The ideal range is generally between 6 and 8 degrees Celsius, so about 43 to 46 Fahrenheit.
Why that temperature?
Chilling it properly really helps to emphasize that refreshing acidity. It stops the alcohol from feeling too prominent. It allows the delicate aromas to express themselves without being muted by warmth. And crucially, it keeps those lovely bubbles fine and lively. Warm Prosecco is not pleasant.
Noted. And do you absolutely need a fancy flute glass, or will any old wine glass do the job?
Well, the classic tall, narrow flute glass isn't just for show. It's actually designed to preserve those delicate bubbles for longer by reducing the surface area, and it helps concentrate the aromas toward your nose as you sip.
Okay, so the flute has a purpose.
It does. A tulip-shaped glass, which is a bit wider in the bowl but narrows again at the rim, is also a very good choice. It allows a bit more of the aromas to open up compared to a flute, while still doing a decent job of preserving the bubbles.
What about just a standard white wine glass?
You could technically use a regular white wine glass, especially maybe for more complex Prosecco Superior where you want to appreciate the aromas more fully. But the downside is the larger surface area means the bubbles will likely dissipate much more quickly. So flute or tulip is generally recommended.
Okay, flute or tulips, got it. Now the really fun part, what about food pairings? What should you eat with Prosecco? Is it just for canapes?
Oh, it's much more versatile than just canapes, although it's brilliant with them. Its acidity makes it a fantastic match for all sorts of appetizers and finger foods, especially things that are a bit salty or fried, as the acidity cuts right through the richness.
Nice. What else?
It pairs beautifully with seafood and light fish dishes. Think grilled prawns, calamari, light flaky white fish.
Yay.
The wine's freshness and subtle minerality really complement the delicate flavors of the sea.
Okay, seafood makes sense.
Salads and many vegetarian tapas work well too. The acidity can balance out sharp vinaigrettes, and the fruitiness of the Prosecco often complements fresh vegetables or light pasta dishes.
What about spicier food?
It can work surprisingly well with light Asian cuisine. Think Thai or Vietnamese dishes that have delicate flavors, maybe some fresh herbs, a bit of chili heat. The Prosecco's freshness and slight sweetness, if you choose an extra dry, for example, can provide a lovely counterbalance.
Interesting. And desserts. You mentioned the sweeter styles earlier.
Exactly. While the drier styles are great before and during the meal, the off-dry and sweeter styles, extra dry, demi-sec, can be lovely with light fruit-based desserts. Think fruit tarts, pavlova with berries, or just a simple bowl of fresh strawberries. You generally want the wine to be at least as sweet as the dessert.
So it's really quite a versatile wine that can take you through different parts of a meal or just be great on its own.
Absolutely. From aperitif right through to dessert, depending on the style you choose. It's very adaptable.
Looking ahead then, thinking about the future, what do you think it holds for Prosecco, both in its stronghold like the UK and more globally? Are there any sort of clouds on the horizon for this incredibly popular bubbly?
Well, success always brings challenges, doesn't it? One major thing the Prosecco region has to grapple with is maintaining consistent quality, especially with the huge volumes being produced now for the DOC level.
Right, avoiding dilution of the brand.
Exactly. And alongside that comes the increasing pressure and need for sustainable practices in the vineyards and wineries. Things like water management, reducing pesticide use, protecting the biodiversity and the unique terroir. These are becoming more and more important both environmentally and for the wine's image.
Consumers are definitely asking more questions about that sort of thing now.
They are. Then there's the challenge of increased competition. Other sparkling wines from around the world, Cava is improving its image. You've got English sparkling wine, Crémance from France, New World sparklers. They're all vying for that same market space.
True.
And of course, like all agricultural products, Prosecco faces the potential impacts of climate change on the Glera grape. Changes in temperature patterns, extreme weather events, these could affect yields and quality down the line.
So the industry can't just rest on its laurels and assume the popularity will last forever at this level.
Not at all. There's a clear need, highlighted in the sources, for continued development and for really highlighting what makes Prosecco special beyond just the price.
How can they do that?
One key way is by promoting the higher quality tiers, especially the superior DOCGs like Conegliano Valdobbiadene and Oslo, really emphasizing the complexity, the terroir expression, even the aging potential of these top wines helps elevate the whole category.
Showcasing the premium end.
Exactly. Also, highlighting the unique characteristics that come from different subzones within the region, the different soils and microclimates. And of course, continuing with innovation, whether that's through refining winemaking techniques, exploring styles with longer lees contact maybe, focusing on lower sugar levels, or through creative marketing that tells the story of the region and the quality.
And that focus on sustainability you mentioned sounds really crucial for its long-term image and success.
It's absolutely vital for ensuring the long-term health of the vineyards, for meeting consumer expectations, and for maintaining the reputation of Prosecco as a quality product from a responsible region.
Are we seeing any specific new trends or innovations coming through already?
We are. The introduction and growth of Prosecco Rosé DOC a few years ago was a big one, adding a new dimension. There's also more focus on precision viticulture, using technology to manage vineyards more effectively and sustainably. And as mentioned, some producers are experimenting with styles that maybe push the boundaries a little, perhaps longer lees contact for more texture, or really focusing on those bone-dry Brut Nature styles.
So those superior DOCGs are really kind of leading the charge in terms of showing the peak quality potential of Prosecco.
You could definitely say that. They play a really strategic role in elevating the global perception of Prosecco, showing that it can be a truly high-quality, terroir-driven sparkling wine, not just a cheerful, affordable alternative.
And for listeners in the UK, are there some key producers or brands they might recognize that represent this quality?
Yeah, there are many good ones, but some names you often see in the UK market that offer reliable quality across different price points include brands like Veneto, La Marca's huge, Freixenet, who also make cava, interestingly. Adami is excellent, especially for DOCG, Valdo, Zonin. There's a good range available if you look.
Well, this has been a truly fascinating deep dive into the world of Prosecco. I feel like I understand it so much better now, beyond just, popping the cork.
It's a great story, isn't it? And to sum it all up, Prosecco's remarkable success, particularly in the UK, really is down to that powerful combination. Being reasonably priced and accessible, having a flavor profile that genuinely appeals to a lot of people, being marketed very effectively, and crucially, possessing its own distinct identity. An identity rooted in the Glera grape and the specific Charmat method used to make it.
It's definitely more than just a budget-friendly bubbly, as you said right at the start. It has its own unique qualities, its own history, and a specific way of tasting that people clearly love.
Precisely. So for you, our listener, we really hope this deep dive encourages you perhaps to explore the different styles and quality levels of Prosecco next time you're choosing a bottle. Maybe seek out one of those superior DOCGs from Conegliano Valdobbiadene or Osolo and see if you can taste the difference.
Yeah.
Consider its versatility, too. Think about trying it with different foods, not just as a party starter. And maybe share your own discoveries and experiences with this much-loved sparkling wine. What new aspects of Prosecco would you uncover next?